I left Thornwood behind, crossing for the final time just as the sun came up over the cotton fields. Not once did I look back. There was simply nothing worth seeing anymore. 6 weeks later, Daniel and his family crossed over into Canada. They settled in a small town called Buckton, about 8 miles east of Detroit. The community had been founded by former slaves, a place where black folks could actually own land, start up businesses, raise their families without fear. Daniel never worked a forge again after that. He'd spent more than enough years laboring with fire and metal. Instead, he turned to teaching. He showed other escaped slaves how to read and write, giving them what they needed to build fresh lives in a fresh country. Ruth started up a boarding house that quietly served as a stop on the Underground Railroad. For years afterward, she sheltered runaways hating for freedom, feeding them, giving them clothes, helping them vanish into the vast Canadian wilderness. Samuel took up medicine. Even with his lungs damaged from the coal mines, he managed to become a doctor, one of the first black physicians in the whole province of Ontario. He spent his whole career treating patients who had nowhere else to turn, former slaves, and free blacks, and poor whites who couldn't afford the white doctors. Eliza never really got over what had been done to her. She never married. She hardly ever talked about her time in Atlanta, but she found meaning in looking after children. She started an orphanage for black kids, many of them the sons and daughters of slaves who hadn't managed to reach freedom. She raised them with fierce love, absolutely determined that they'd never know the horrors she'd lived through. And Benjamin, little Benjamin, the one bought as a plaything for a rich man's son, he became a lawyer. After the Civil War finished and slavery got abolished, he headed back to the United States. He spent the next 4 decades hunting down former slave owners and bringing them to justice. He won case after case, getting compensation for former slaves, exposing the crimes of the old plantation system, making certain the world never forgot what had happened. Daniel Cross passed away on March 6, exactly 33 years after his family had been sold away from him. He had around him his wife, his children, his grandchildren, and all the countless lives had touched during his years as a teacher and a railroad conductor. His final words were to Ruth. "I found every single one, just like I promised." Ruth held his hand and smiled through her tears. "I always knew you would." Daniel Cross was laid to rest in Buckton Cemetery beside the graves of other former slaves who had made the journey to freedom. His tombstone makes no mention of what he did in no mention of the Magnolia House or the Harrison Mines or Judge Brandt or the Webb family. No mention of Colonel Whitmore or the chain with the names. It simply reads, Daniel Cross, husband, father, teacher, he kept his promise. The story of Daniel Cross never made it into the official history books. The newspapers back then recorded the events as accidents, coincidences, unrelated tragedies. A fire in a New Orleans brothel. A mining accident in Virginia. A judge dying of natural causes. A family ruined by scandal. A plantation owner found dead in his library. But the truth survived in other ways. In the whispered stories passed from parent to child in black communities all across the South. In the songs that spoke of a man who walked right into hell and brought his family back out. In the legends of the blacksmith who forged his own justice when the law wouldn't give it, and now you know the truth too. Daniel Cross wasn't any saint. He killed men. He burned buildings. He did things no law could ever excuse. But he did them for the only reason that ever counted. He did them for love. The system that enslaved him was enormous and powerful and protected by all the authority of law and custom and tradition. It told him his family was property, that his love meant nothing, that his children could be sold like animals, and he had no right to object. Daniel Cross disagreed, and he was ready to burn the whole world down to prove it. Some people called him a monster. Some people called him a hero. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. But one thing's for certain. When they took everything from Daniel Cross, they made a mistake. They created something far more dangerous than a slave. They created a man with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. And in the end, that man won. This was the story of Daniel Cross. A story that haunts history. A story that will never be forgotten.